All right, so this is part two, and we're going to go into some of the more specialized um, techniques of drawing with pen and ink. So before I went through hatching, cross hatching, contour hatching, scumble, and stipple, in this video we're going to talk about different ways of using our pen, different ways of using a brush, even with ink, and stuff like that. All right, so if you have a good brush, and I would just use a good watercolor brush, you can combine this technique with all of your drawing techniques. So let's say, for instance, I'm drawing a little still life here of forms, right? So okay, so let's say I have these two forms, right? So I can combine a lot of my drawing techniques going on in here. I can use my contour hatching to create the form of the sphere. Really nicely like that. I can use hatching here to add some tone value to this this section of the cube. I could use cross hatching, perhaps. To have this sphere cast a shadow against this cube. Right? So I can draw all this in here. But what if I wanted to use my brush? What if I wanted to get some really high drama into this piece? So I'm just going to use a good watercolor brush here. Dip it into my ink. And now I can actually paint with the ink and use this to get some really high contrast areas in here. And then this black is really going to stand out, and it's going to make these other pieces just really jump off of the page. All right, and we use this technique a lot in pen and ink if we're trying to add these areas of very high contrast. Right? And you can even make this brush work as lively as you want it to be. It doesn't have to just follow that line, but it can be a really, really interesting shape. We see this in comic books, in graphic novels, anywhere where we want that really high, powerful contrast kind of coming in. All right. And it just really focuses our eye here, almost like it's almost like a stage set, right? And we have a stage and then a spotlight on these other things, and it really adds a lot of drama into this. So that's just using that brush, but we can also use our watercolor. I mean, not our watercolor, but our ink as a type of wash. So it almost becomes like watercolor. So what I can do is I can mix. Put a little water here so you can see it. I'm going to mix a little water into this ink and water it down. So now it becomes a gray. And I can help define things this way with my ink. So you might have the same kind of high drama things that going on like you have with the black ink. Or you can come in here and do some really subtle kind of shading. Almost like you were accenting this with a watercolor, but instead we're just using ink. All right? Depends on how much water you mix in it. Depends on, will determine how dark that ink is going to be. So I can make very, very soft washes or much darker washes like this. Okay? Another thing that we can do. So that was working with just the brush or working with washes. And then there's another thing that is really kind of interesting, I think, with pen and ink, and that is almost using it like an airbrush. So here I've cut a stencil. I don't know if you can see this. I've just taken a piece of tracing paper and cut a circle out of it. And now I'm going to use a toothbrush. And this is a very, very old toothbrush, as you can tell, and I've used it a lot for my inking because it's very black. But I'm going to take it and dip it in just a little bit of ink. Just put a couple of drops of ink in a palette or in a bowl or something. And I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to spritz it. Get up here where you can see, hopefully, what I'm doing. I can spritz it with my thumb. And it's hard to see because my hand's right in the way. But then the ink kind of splatters out like this. It's spraying. So if I cut a stencil like this, I can start to spray into that stencil. And I'm getting really, really super fine dots kind of coming into that. I don't know if you guys trying to get it so you can see that better. That's a little bit better. Another drop of ink. Right? So then I can just keep doing it. I can just keep building this up with these little spritzes of ink. I can make one side of it much darker than the other. Use these spritzes to build up form. And volume. Right? So right now it just looks like a bunch of spray. Like I'm really making a big mess, right? But look what happens if I pull this back. Now I've got this very, very subtle gradation going on here. Beautiful, beautiful texture. And it's really, really kind of fun. So that's another little technique that we can use, or a couple different techniques that we can use when we're working with pen and ink. On the next video, I'm going to show how these actually come into play into other drawings, or into real drawings. Okay?